before I invest all the resources. Let me see if anybody wants this. So I would go on TikTok and I would show these green screen videos of lists that I make in my notes app. And I told myself, when the first video cracks 1 million views and 1,000 people sign up for a Google Doc, then I'm going to go build this product. And that happened within 3 weeks.
Hello, and welcome to Notion Founder Fridays. This is where we sit down with builders who've been in the trenches and we talk shop. We talk product, design, all of the real lessons that nobody's going to put in a slide deck. My name is Lauryn Motamedi, and I'm a product leader at Notion across growth and new products. And today I'm joined by Lillie Sun, who is the co-founder of Ditto. Ditto is a social app to share lists about your life with your friends. And it's had some amazing milestones already. Recently, number 13 on the iOS App Store, over 45,000 lists shared. I'm an angel investor in Lillie's company, and I'm so excited that we are joined by Lillie today to learn a little bit more about what it has taken to get Ditto to where it is and get some words of advice on where to go next. So Lillie, thank you for joining us.
I'm so excited. This is a combination of all my favorite things: being here with you, being part of Notion's ecosystem, talking about building a company, talking on camera, telling stories. Like I'm gonna have the best time.
I would love to start by just giving the world a bit of the story of how you arrived at starting Ditto. Tell us a bit about the journey of the origin of how Ditto came to be.
Yeah, so I grew up in Toronto. And I remember when I graduated college, I had a full-time corporate job and I knew I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I joined a beauty company. I was there for 2 years. Literally, we started, me and the two co-founders, like dipping cotton pads in coconut oil, putting it in a plastic bag, selling it on Shopify. That was my first experience of building a company. I was there for 2 years. And somehow 2 years later, we had this SKU of like 26 products on shelves at Whole Foods, at Target. And I was 24. I was like, oh my gosh, I made it. I just launched a brand in Target. Like, how much better can this get? And I ended up stepping away about 3 months later because throughout this process, I think what I realized was we were building a company, but we weren't really building a business. Like, there wasn't really a unique insight to our product. There wasn't a competitive advantage. There wasn't a moat. And skincare and beauty was getting very saturated. And I couldn't see the potential of this business. And I left and I was like, okay, what could I build that would have a lot of impact that I feel like I had a unique insight on, that had a competitive advantage? And at the time, I started noticing, just among me, my friends, a lot of people in my generation, like spending a lot of time scrolling on the internet, consuming a lot of content. Everybody was watching videos, watching other people's lives, and nobody was really sharing anymore. And I was always very fascinated by this idea of self expression and how we can have more self expression on the internet. And then the interesting thing I noticed is there was one place on people's phones that they really liked to share, and it was not a social media platform, it was their notes app. Literally, that utility based product first screen of your phone, it was like very much content and stories, but just in the notes app. And that was really a light bulb moment in my head, which was like, can we capture this kind of sharing that's so new, so authentic? It felt like a breath of fresh air. And if we were to build a social platform around it, would people, one, still want to share these ideas now that it's on a social platform? And two, would this be a new way of communicating through lists, through bullet points, very similar to text or photo or video? And that's what led us to experimenting and building with Ditto.
I love that point on building a company versus building a business. But I assume what you built first looked a little bit different to where Ditto is now. And so I'd love to hear
Mm-hmm.
a little bit about that journey.
So we started off actually not making a product at all. I'm not an engineer, I'm a growth background. And I was like, let me just see if anybody wants this. Before I invest all the resources, let me see if anybody wants this. So I would go on TikTok and I would show these green screen videos of lists that I make in my notes app. And I told myself, when the first video cracks 1 million views and 1,000 people sign up for a Google Doc, then I'm going to go build this product. And that happened within 3 weeks. It was a list about why situationships were just not a thing you want to be a part of. And that video got 4 million views pretty much overnight. And then people were like, where is this app? Like, I want to see more of these lists. I want to see other people's lists. I want to make my own. I was like, okay, cool. people are kind of interested. Let's see what we can build. The first product, first company actually, when we started, it wasn't even called Ditto. It was called Breezy. And the name was because we felt like lists made things easy, breezy. And we are like, genius, like we're going to name this Breezy. I checked for two things. I wanted it to start with one of the first five letters of the alphabet. So if any of our investors put our logo on their website, we would be at the top of the page. I didn't want people to have to go to the second page. And then also I checked BRZ on the stock ticker to see if we can have that when we IPO. And I was like, check, check. Gonna name the company Breezy. We built it first as a web app, so not even a mobile app in the App Store, but just a web page that people could use. And it literally looked like a blank document on a web page that you could make a title, make a list, press post, and it would go to your account, and that's it. And the very first version of the MVP, the thing that we wanted to test was, would people post lists publicly? That was our own validate. The only thing we wanted to validate. We didn't really care how many followers they had. We didn't care about the search experience. We didn't care about the discovery experience. It wasn't meant for browsing. It was just, hey, we know people like to share in the Notes app, but that's private. So we need to see if they're willing to share the same kind of material on a public website. And so we built that public website, and that was very much the first MVP. And then when we saw people who went from the wait list to use this public website, and they were making lists, and the content was very similar to the content that would be in the Notes app. So still extremely personal, very niche. It wasn't like they were just making lists about restaurants or books. It was advice and stories and like regrets. That was another light bulb moment for us. That's like, okay, people do want to share. Now let's see if we can build network effects and build actually a social media model on top of it.
One thing that comes to mind, having seen your journey and also hearing you voice this over, is something that is unique about how you've built formerly Breezy, now Ditto, is actually that you've been building in public and building openly and taking that input from those MVPs and from those original TikToks to then craft the business that you've built now and that you'll continue to build. And that feels unusual to me, or maybe counter to some of the advice that someone might get starting a company, right? I guess what advice would you give to builders who are tuning into this on how that sort of helped you, or any watch outs? What should we take from that experience you've had?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. And I have like a minor hot take in this question, which is I do think at times nowadays, with the way short form video has exploded and what Twitter X has become. I think some people only build in public and are only making content and actually are not actually building the actual company. So I think it is a very fine balance. For us, I think one, the reason we wanted to build in public was because we're asking our users for a lot. We're a fun, not functional product. We don't market Ditto's value prop as get this faster, get this cheaper, make money, find love. You're asking people to post lists about their life. You're asking people to volunteer stories. You're asking them to be unhinged and be chaotic. And so if you're asking a lot, building in public and bringing your community along and showing them how you're doing things and why you're doing things, when it's time to make the ask, you get it a lot easier. And I think that's the reason a lot of people always say, like, aren't you afraid another company is going to build the exact same product as you? And I was like, you can build the exact same product as us, but you can't guarantee a girl who's 21 years old is going to download your app and share what she learned about her breakup the same way she would do with us, with our community, and with Ditto. When we were called Breezy, looking at the social media ecosystem and landscape, the company that we were actually really inspired by at the time was Pinterest. We very much felt like Ditto was a Pinterest inspo, discovery, aspiration, aesthetic based platform. And then we would talk to our users and we would ask them, hey, do you guys use Pinterest? And a lot of our power users don't use Pinterest and they don't associate Ditto with Pinterest in their minds. And we're like, that's super interesting. Well, what do you kind of associate Ditto with? And the responses we get were, oh, I think it's kind of like girl Twitter, like a Elon Musk free Twitter is what I think it is. So through learning that, we're like, okay, well, Breezy and the whole vibe of being like a Pinterest inspiration angle isn't really compelling for the power users who are actually evangelists of our product. what you like about Twitter and Substack and all these other apps is how you feel like you're involved with the community and you feel like you relate to someone. And that's why we renamed the company Ditto, because Ditto means same, and we wanted it to feel like a collective experience. And so a lot of those insights I think we would have just missed or had gone a lot later down the road if we weren't literally actively speaking to our users and our community every single day.
Related point to this, something that is important today and quite impressive for you as a founder is how you developed your personal brand. Can you tell us a little bit about how intentional that was, what work you've done, what advice you have for builders on the role that your founder or builder personal brand can play on building a business?
I think when I first started, it was what can I not do as a founder? I cannot build this product. I maybe could teach myself code and build this on my own with a lot of the tools and resources, but that's not a good use of my time. And was very like when I was very candidly thinking about, okay, if I'm not going to build this product, I need to do every single thing else possible to get it off the ground. And if that means being the face of the company and building my personal brand to be a customer acquisition tool, so be it. Like, let's get after it. And I think that's what I did for the first, I think, year and a half, 2 years is build this personal brand as an entrepreneur and as a founder. I've actually pivoted that a little bit in the last 8 months. And I have my goal with my personal brand now is to embody the kind of user I'm trying to attract. What I'm looking to do is be that person that overshares and champions that idea of oversharing. And so if that's my goal, then on LinkedIn, rather than posting about fundraising announcements or product releases, I post about a mistake that I've made or something that I've learned in college or a personal story. So I think the mechanisms of building a personal brand is pretty much the same across the board. You pick a platform, you pick a channel, you pick your topics, you add a picture, you tell a story. But the actual substance, I think what a lot of people don't realize when they're building a personal brand is you should be building the brand of which you're trying to attract attention for. And so for building a consumer social app, like building a personal brand that gets you quality users is most important.
Feels like something that makes sense when you say it and also doesn't happen that often. Like it really does take that intentional focus on knowing who your customer is and showing up for them as a founder too. What keeps you up at night or what's that next milestone that, currently is ticking in your brain that you want to achieve?
I think what keeps me up at night now is we're just really obsessed with the idea of network effects. Like, how do we build network effects? How do we, because most of our strategy today has been digital marketing. That's where my background is. And digital marketing is very efficient. You see results very fast. If you're a great content creator, you go viral, you get thousands of downloads. But with building a social network where the main purpose is seeing other people's content, when you ask people what kind of content they like to see, especially for something like Ditto where lists are very broad, you hear things across the board. I want food, I want travel, I want to hear about relationships, I want to hear about college, I want to hear about my city, which is okay, but there's a lot of topics. And I think we're an engineering team of three, so we can't fully support that. But the one thing that every single person says is, I want to see content from my friends. I don't like I my friend can make a list about what they bought at Trader Joe's and I'm interested in that. We can either go the route of super efficient top of funnel acquisition and then make the product more interest based. So when they join, they find their interests more easily. They see the content they like, and hopefully they will then refer other people who are in similar interests, and then we can start to get little sub networks forming under, like running, under books, whatever. And then slowly over time, the carrying capacity for interest can become broader. And then at a certain point, it'll just be all interest and then everyone can use the app. Or we go the other way around and we try to build network effects right from the top. How do we acquire friend groups collectively as a whole? How do we just infiltrate a group of 6 people and bring all of them on? How do we infiltrate a group of 10, 20, 30, maybe even 100 people and bring them all on? Because if you do that, it doesn't matter what they post. We don't need hardcore interest matching and algorithms because they're coming on with their best friends and they want to see what they post. But it's really hard to do that and it's very inefficient top of funnel. So it was a mix of like, what do we feel like is going to be most successful for the company? And we decided to do the latter. And more specifically, we decided to do that at college campuses because that is the best place to take control of weak networks and bring them on all at the same time. In addition to that, college is really appealing to us because it's a repeatable, scalable strategy. If you can figure out a way to make it work, which is really difficult, but if you can, and you're able to, let's say, Michigan has 42,000 students, your first semester you get 3,000, your second semester you get, seven, and then by the time you hit 10, it just tips over because everyone at school is on this new map. Then you can bring that to the hundreds of thousands of other schools across the US. And that path to getting to your first million users, first 10 million users, just feels a lot more exciting and resilient than, okay, let's fingers crossed this month go viral 17 times so we can hit our growth numbers and then pray that a percentage of them retain. So that has been keeping me up at night because co- college programs, like I think everyone is building a college program these days. Like I last time I saw Doritos is launching a college ambassador program. And so everybody wants to do it. I think a lot of people struggle to get it right. Even big companies struggle to get it right. It's also very capital and time intensive. And so it's been just an interesting pivot that we've not pivot, but a direction that we've taken as an entire company. We've made a lot of product changes to now serve this market a lot better, but it's been all hands on deck with Ditto going to campus.
Shifting gears a little bit, I want to pop the hood open. Tell us about your tool stack. What are you using to power this company
Mm.
to where it is that you can't live without, or what are some of the things that you might advise other teams consider?
Our team internally, we did this thing, I think maybe like 4 weeks ago. Internally, we called it the Great Migration. And so we actually spent, I think, like 2 weeks doing a great migration where everybody had to go and find all of their non Notion docs and migrate them over to their appropriate spots. Even if it was from, like 4 months ago, 6 months ago, we wanted it to still exist in Notion. Other tools that we're on, so obviously, we're a big content first company. We post anywhere from 3 to 5 pieces of content a day across all platforms. We have editors, we have people who help with scripts, content creators. One of my favorite platforms to use is Rella. Rella is like my number one place for managing content. It pretty much replaces like Google Drive. But yeah, I would say between, at least for myself, like Notion, Figma, Rella are my go-tos. I spend most of my time in there.
Everyone's talking about AI right now. Obviously, Ditto is for list sharing from us to each other, right? From friends and people to friends and people. How are you thinking about AI on your roadmap?
We're definitely thinking about AI on our roadmap, both where to use it, but also where not to use it. I think both Connor and I have a pretty personal stance around AI generated content. So, AI generated lists, we are not a fan of. And I think as a company, our ethos is there will never be AI generated lists on Ditto in any way, shape, or form. That means no AI generated titles, no AI generated lists, bullets, additional pieces. AI generated content is not the problem we're trying to solve. What we're trying to solve is a place for people to share their ideas. And so for us, AI should not be used in the creation process. But what AI and LLMs in general are really great at is reasoning. And for us, especially being a text-based platform, there's so much latent understanding of like what these lists mean. If someone is writing bullet points about the things that they like, um, you can tell their personality just by their tone of voice. You can tell the way they think by the words they use, especially over time as you make lists. And it's really interesting for us internally to explore a lot of the different directions we can take things using AI. My boyfriend and I actually started dating because of Ditto. We had met like a week ago, so really early on. He's like, I'll support you. I'll download your app and try it. I was like, beautiful. He downloaded the app. And then a couple of days later, he asked me out on a date. And this was our first date. And he's like, let's go bowling. And I remember like seeing that text message and being like, guys, there's no way he asked me to go bowling on a first date, but I can't tell him that I don't want to go bowling. I'm going to make a list on Ditto, which is called Breezy at the time. I'm going to make a list on Ditto and I'm going to call it first date ideas. And I'm going to write down the things that I want to do on a first date. It was winter time. I wrote ice skating, go to a holiday market, get some drinks, bowling, not on the list. And I posted it and we were all like waiting anxiously. And then lo and behold, 2 hours later, I get a text message from him. And he's like, hey, so the bowling alley is actually fully booked tonight. We should just go ice skating instead. I think that'll be really fun. Like, are you up for that? And I was like, yeah. I like texted him back. I was like, oh yeah, like whatever. I would just I can't wait to hang out with you. Like ice skating, bowling, it's all good. But yeah, let's go ice skating. So all that to say, Ditto is there's many applications of it, and it's been really fun to build a product like this.
What a great story. I had no idea. So, okay, I'm going to end on just one piece of advice. Your single best piece of advice for someone who's tuning into this, who is a day one founder, they're just getting started. What do they need to know from you?
I think my best tip would be to just trust the 13th hour early on in my startup journey. Something happened where it was all falling apart, and then in the 13th hour, something happened and it worked out. Like you're raising around and you've done every single call, and it's like every call is a no, and then suddenly Friday 3 p.m. someone's like, yeah, we're down to have a follow-up conversation. You're like, oh my god, the 13th hour, it's always the 13th hour. That doesn't mean you don't work hard, and it doesn't mean you are lazy and you're just relying on things to fall into your lap by any means. I think this idea of trusting the 13th hour to me just means like just have faith that things will work out. Sometimes they won't also. Sometimes 13th hour comes and you're still screwed and you're like, great, like back to the drawing board. So I feel like just trusting that the 13th hour, I think that's just what happens in building a company, and you have to have faith in that.
Well, thank you so much. This has been really cool to hear your story. I'm so excited for all of our listeners to hear about your journey and to try Ditto and to experience the magic. But I feel like we learned a lot from you today. I felt like I learned a lot about really knowing and embodying your customer. So thank you so much for joining us on Founder
Of
Fridays.
course. Thanks, Lauren.
See you soon.
See ya.